the first section on assessment power, we have Galen Buckwalter, who besides for being the CEO and founder and CEO of MLSci, he was the CSO of eHarmony. So data, a lot of data and a lot of love and a lot of human emotion. And then to focus in on amplification, we have Kwiri Yang, who is the CEO and founder of LifeGyde, also an SU Ventures company, or she's officing at SU. And then for enhancement, to focus in on enhancement, we have Jena Davidson, who is the CEO and founder of Jensen Aten. And so please welcome my fantastic panel. So we're going to start with just 3-sentence intros, or I mean 3-minute intros from you guys about your vision and your company and how you came to do what you're doing.
I started my career as a traditional academic researcher, did a lot of Alzheimer's work, looking at the effects of hormones on cognitive functioning. One thing that I found to be extremely valuable very early on was my training in psychometrics. The ability to make sense out of what we call latent constructs, or things that we know exist, you know, among humans, but we really don't, we don't have an objective way of measuring them. You know, things like personality, values, intelligence. But with psychometrics, there was very systematic, some would say tedious, process of actually developing valid tests. And that's what I focused on. That ended up through a number of very serendipitous events. I was asked to help a clinical psychologist friend of mine who had worked with couples for like 35 years, and he came to the conclusion that there was a large percentage of those couples that couldn't be helped. They were fundamentally mismatched. So his question was, could we look at them and come up with a way of matching people before the event that would help them in the long term? I said, sure, I'll try that. And long story short, that was eHarmony. We developed and validated an instrument that at this point shows divorce rates that are about half of what matches are, which is the largest competitor, and matches, interestingly enough, are also significantly lower than what happens in the wild, as we like to say. So there's a real demonstrable advantage of using psychometrics at scale online, and we'll talk about that more. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Kwiri?
So I started my business when I was 16 in social impact. So the company grew to over $3 million in profit. We hired over 100 mechanics to help with energy efficiency across California, and I was really young, under the age of 19, when I also graduated. And during that time, I felt really lonely, isolated, didn't really know who to talk to turn to when I was getting sued, going through lawsuit litigation as a teenager. But I understood how important it was to be in social impact space and helping other people. And when you solve other people's problem, people pay you. And so realizing that, I continued in the space, and I sold my third company to a #1 fastest growing tablet company. Was 2 years in a row #1 consumer electronics company for in tablet for children's education. And seeing the impact of how technology can amplify the need, and also bringing the need of education to remote places and underserved communities, because we had 4.4 million users around the world, and these were K-6 children actually learning how to use technology to solve challenges. And how we did that was by giving them really fun, gamified games that taught them English, math, science, and history. And seeing that, we went into starting another company in behavioral change, teaching people soft skills to make changes in corporations. And this year, I thought, hey, if we can make these type of changes, we can probably also teach students and where the biggest needs are, which is the youngest generation, the incoming generation of workforce, Gen Zs, born between the year 1995 and 2010. And so that's how LifeGyde came about, because 1 in 5 students in universities are experiencing depression and anxiety. It's a really big problem, and a lot of people are currently looking at it in a sense of, oh, let's go fix these students, but really the young people are not part of the problem, they're part of the solution. So our company was born because we thought, you know what, we need to empower these young people to empower themselves to change these global grand challenges. It's not the next generation, it's not the older generation, it's going to be the next generation who's going to be solving these problems. So what if we empower them to empower each other, and through peer counseling and peer coaching platform, and using technology to amplify that impact, we're truly able to change the world. And so that's how the company went about it, and I'd love to talk more about it.
Great, thank you.
And thanks for having us here.
Thank you. Jenna?
Just checking this is on. Oh, it is. So Jensen Aten is my company, and I set it up 10 years ago, focusing on coaching, leadership development, really anything to do with people and the impact that we have on everybody around us. It was about 12 months ago that I decided to look beyond my flip chart and think about technology. And I'd always been very interested in technology for learning, but I hadn't come across anything that really inspired me. And one day I found myself out in Belgrade, and I met a man, and he had an HTC Vive headset. I didn't know anything about virtual reality. I didn't know what it meant, but I put this headset on, and I was quite blown away. There was a monster coming towards me, and I started to feel my heart rate going up. So I set myself the challenge, could I create something different that could encourage people, the people that I've been working with for years, to be able to come to work as their true selves. And we hear a lot about come to work as your true self, come to work being less stressful, come to work happy, and ultimately, if you can come to work happy and less stressful, surely you're going to do a better job. So it's easy to say. Companies spend millions of pounds on culture and creating the right environment, but actually how you encourage your employees to live that culture is very, very difficult, and I see that every day. So what we've created, and what I'm very proud of, is a multiplayer virtual reality product with lots of other different bits and bobs of technology that fit into that encourages people to start dialogue about the things that are difficult, to show vulnerability, to talk about their strengths. Actually, it's not always easy to say what you're good at, but it encourages dialogue where people start to talk to each other about where they need help, where they need support, how they can help each other to do better jobs, to come to work with less stress.
Great, thank you. And so I just wanted to get a couple of popcorn questions from the audience. We won't answer them right now, but it's just if there's something that's just a burning question that you would like to hear us address while we are chatting about this. Does anyone have anything? You could just shout it out. Anything particular? Any burning questions?
eHarmony versus Tinder?
Okay. Another one? We're just going to gather them all for a second. Any questions? Okay, well, if something else comes up, you can put it out there later, and so, because we'll have Q&A at the end. And so, Galen, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the assessment power and what we can do, what we can't do, and what's coming. for just a few minutes?
Well, I think most people think about assessment and immediately go to, you know, the Likert scale, self-report kind of instruments that we've all taken for jobs and things like that. And those instruments have served a useful role, I would argue. They're certainly limited. They're prone to self-report, either exaggerations or you know, trying to fit with in present yourself socially desirable ways. But I think the changes that are happening with assessment now, you see a lot of movement towards using simulations where, you know, you're engaged in game-like activities where you have to make relevant decisions, much more ecologically valid, even assessments in virtual reality. But perhaps the most interesting area of assessment right now is what's happening in using AI and deep learning to evaluate what we produce in our kind of daily interchanges. The most kind of rich data set that's available to us is social media. And in looking at what's currently available at SciML, my current company, we have systems that will extract personality that's as effective as self-report tests from about 500 words of text. And that's based on the Hexaco model, which is kind of the state-of-the-art understanding of personality right now. It's honesty, extroversion, emotionality, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness. 6 dimensions that are incredibly powerful in understanding what makes individuals unique across all cultures and all around the world. So we can get that from text. We can also get emotions from text, how you're feeling right now. The word patterns that we use are, you know, just the text itself conveying how we're feeling in the here and now. You add on to that, say, a track of your audio and all the intonations that we use, the speed that we're speaking at, our prosody, all of that contains information about our current state. So, you know,
Sounds like there's some really powerful things that are coming.
Well, those are here.
Yeah.
Those are here. What's coming is more and more integration, where
Right.
you know, you integrate that in with your heart rate variability, you know, and other psychophysiological measures, and you're going to be able to. What I envision is basically, instead of thinking about this as assessment, it's really going to offer us, as you suggested, another channel of input to understand ourselves and to understand, not only understand, you know, our emotions, which, by the way, you talk to most clinical psychologists, people have no clue about what they're actually feeling.
It sounds like that's going to be, it's the added layer. It would be interesting, you know, I think it'll be interesting, that level of of detail when that gets amplified in systems like what Kwiri is building. So could you talk a little bit about what's possible when you amplify young people and what you're doing with LifeGyde?
Yeah, what's really fascinating is we have been, the whole team has just been going to university campuses, Santa Clara University, Stanford, Columbia University, just to listen to what the students are saying and what are the challenges that they're going through, and also listening from the faculty what universities are currently doing with this crisis of anxiety and depression that's just rising, and the number of suicide that's rising on campus. And what we're hearing is that the number is just astonishing. 86% of university students who committed suicide did not seek help from therapists or counselors, which goes on to tell you that, number one, there's lack of resources. Number two, there's lack of awareness from the students, and also there's a huge blind spot. Students don't know that they have a problem and that there is resources who can help them. So what we also learned was there are universities who are doing a fantastic job. For example, UCLA has created this huge movement and innovation in solving and tackling this issue through building out a UCLA emotional resiliency program. And what we've learned is one college counselor, college student counselor, so peer counselor, can impact the life of 75 students in a school year. So amplifying that by utilizing technology, currently what's being done is very traditional, but what we have done in the past is standardizing the curriculum and making it fun, making it engaging by gamifying it, and utilizing technology as a platform to facilitate this human connection. And a lot of the students currently feel disconnected than ever. They actually don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to listen. They have no guidance. And there's a huge sense of loneliness and isolation. 2/3 of college students currently feel very lonely and isolated, but they're connected than ever. I mean, they're on the phones all the time, and I got called out recently. They're like, are you on Snapchat? Are you on Marco Polo? I'm like, what are these things? You know, I tried to streamline my communication tool. They're on like 5 or 6 different channels, but they always complain, you know, I don't really have a friend. Right. And the top 3 things that they're going through, the challenges when we listen to the peer counseling platform, number 1 is interpersonal conflict. They don't really know how to talk to their friends, how to go about conflict resolution. So we're developing a curriculum that can be standardized and through digital medium, and we like to call it, we're currently technology agnostic, because it's really the students who are co-creating with us. We're doing the bottom-up approach rather than top-down, because we believe that really the ones who can create this type of solutions that will work is the students. When they experiment, fail, and create themselves and innovate, it's really going to be the platform that they'll be using, and they themselves will be creating the movement and amplify that impact. So there's been a huge study that's been done that social support is really, really impactful, and students are, they're thirsty for the guidance. They're asking for it, and they love it. You could see the sparkle in their eyes when we give them the decision-making tree. When your friend is going through this, do this, and then when you need to do that, and they love it. But there's just lack of guidance, and we have that. So what we're doing is we're simply using technology to amplify that impact.
That's great. And then, you know, I can envision at some point, with permission, being able to pick up the data streams for their own ability to understand what's happening for them, you know, what's going on. And so everyone on this panel was also selected because their products can touch one another too. And so I guess, Jena, if you would, I'm very interested in the conversations we've had about the way you've seen trust get built between teams, and you know, the combination of trust and vulnerability at work from people using your product to train their teams.
So for me, trust is the basis for, well, for all team effectiveness, organization effectiveness. But to be clear, trust is a big word, so what does it mean? And for me, it's about having the courage to be open about who you are, the things that sometimes you struggle with, your fears, your failures, and your successes too. But if you're sat at work around the table, striking up a conversation and just talking about vulnerabilities it's not very easy, and I think we tend to move away from it because why would we open ourselves up? But we know that if there isn't trust in place, then how do we start to build in the foundations for having good constructive discussions and being able to make decisions, the right and the best decisions? So without trust, we don't make good decisions, and ultimately can our organizations be at their best? So what I have found through the last 12 months of working with the VR technology is that we've been able to create environments which push people into having to show themselves quite quickly. It's quite amazing to see that once you put your headset on, you're immersed into something where you can't help but just be yourself. That immediately shows what you're good at, and actually in our case, we're good at being able to give feedback to say, well done, do more of that. But it also provides a space to say, I need some help. I need some help in being able to put my hand up and make a decision or give an option about something, or I need some help in perhaps not talking too much, or whatever it may well be. So I'm showing vulnerability there. And as we go through our workshops, we focus very much on a learning cycle. So the opportunities within VR is that you can go into a scenario, you can come out, you can talk about it. What was good, what wasn't good, what would you do differently? You go back in again. And throughout this cycle, you keep improving. And I think for me, the best piece about it is that at the end of the day, you've had fun. Actually, fun is something that I know a lot of the organizations I work with, they don't like the fact that I use the word fun, but you do have fun. But you also go back to work and you go, well, I've tried something different. I've shown that I can be courageous, and wow, it felt really good, and I'm going to go back to the office now. I'm going to do more of that. So these it's almost like you get a toolkit. And the toolkit that you've practiced through VR, you take it back to the day-to-day, and it works. That's really powerful. And for me, I guess I've seen the difference between this and perhaps being given a list of Harvard's top 10 leadership traits and how you just need to be able to do them.
Right.
But how do you do them?
So much more applied. So much
absolutely.
more applied. So what I thought we'd do, we're going to try something different. You get to ask someone on the panel a question as it relates to what you're doing. And then you each get to ask one other person a question. Who wants to go first? Okay, Galen, you go first. You can pick one question.
Jena, for using virtual reality, with groups, do you actually have people interacting in VR with other characters, or are they just doing things to kind of increase their own confidence, or how's it work to help teams?
So it's so you're physically in one space. So you could have 6 players they've all got their headsets on, but you meet together. So you are interacting with each other, and therefore you're making decisions together. You're talking to each other.
And
you
what
have an
kind
avatar.
of decisions do they make?
Well, in one of the products, it's about saving lives, your own and those people around you. But you can also just save yourself. So it kind of brings in a moral dilemma, which is, do you just build a rocket ship and off you go, or do you work together? And I think this is quite a good metaphor for day to day.
Yeah, I love the iteration that you have in your product where, and I love that the trainers are in there too, that it's not just people sort of playing the game, but you actually have real humans in there who are able to give individuated and group feedback. I think that's sort of magical about it. So now you get to ask a question of one of these two.
Yeah, so I'm interested, just a question back to you. I suppose I've always been quite cynical about any kind of assessments and metrics. Do you think that if you were to go forward 100 years with your, I guess, way of thinking, where do you see the future? So 100 years from now,
yeah,
the work that you've been doing, and take that forward, what does the future look like?
You know, I think, as I was saying, it's not going to be a matter of assessment. It's just going to be more a matter of reflection, of you know, because so ultimately it's very hard for us to understand ourselves. I think, you know, we have this idea of empathetic machines, you know, machines that will ultimately understand, you know, our emotions, and in being able to reflect them back. I mean, that's basically what a good therapist learns how to do, is to, you know, hold a mirror up to the individual and, you know, help them realize that they have, you know, the abilities within themselves. And I think that's where we hope this process goes, that by being able to, you know, build machines that are increasingly able to understand our emotions, they'll be able to reflect back to us in a way that helps us grow.
Great, I like that vision. So, you get to ask the final question.
I also wanted to ask a question to Galen. So one of the platform that we're considering is matching platform for college students, because it's a peer counseling platform. One of the concerns we do have is making sure that we utilize the technology in a way that is impactful and positive, but what are some of the ways we're also thinking about? We will have to make sure that unintended consequences due to technology is something we always have to think about as a founder and as a team. What are some of the stories that perhaps you can share that you've come across, and perhaps wisdom that you can share with us as we think about this?
Guidance for how to have a good matchmaking system.
Yeah, well,
for a good cause.
I mean, ultimately, people still want to make a choice. Yeah, I think if you take any sense of choice out of the equation, it's going to start to feel, you know, too controlled. So I think just making it very transparent what the factors are that you're considering in selecting, you know, and encouraging people to look at these particular, you know, people as potential matches. It's really interesting because there hasn't been a successful friendship matching site yet.
Right,
which,
right.
And I swear I've had at least 5 companies, you know, either, you know, ask me to help out, and I mean, all of them tanked. I hope it's not my advice, but you know, I think there must be something about that it haven't really been effective in figuring out how to present that to people. So good luck. I think it's hugely needed.
Yeah.
So with these examples and the talk from before, I hope you all see that we have a great deal more tools than we ever thought we had to get into the mental and emotional well-being and psychological state of the human race. And what we're doing at the Transformative Technology Lab and conference and now Academy is that we have reached out to find the entrepreneurs and the innovators in the world who either are making this technology or want to. We'll have 1,000 people probably when we finish recruiting, and about 20% of those currently have companies, and the others are considering it because, as you heard with Jena, you know, a year ago she was approaching things in a different way, and now she's a tech entrepreneur. And so with this space, because it's so emerging but also so vital, I think that there are people who are currently working in other companies, they're working at corporations, who will also, you know, join this team and, you know, of Jedis and making some of the products that the world truly needs, because, you know, the root problem behind many of the challenges facing mankind or humanity, it's the state of the human mind. So if we can get at that, if we can get at the fear, if we can get at the love and the belonging and the self-understanding, and we can get at connection and new ways for people to interact and potentially even group flow, we can do something about this. And so thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, we're here for them. Any questions? We have about 5 minutes left. Yeah?
Yeah, hi. I was really curious just to learn a little bit more about the purpose problem. I've never heard it quite framed that way. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Was it Bill Gates
It was.
with the purpose problem? Could you say a little bit more about that and just maybe how fundamental it is to this conversation?
Yes, so the way that he defined the purpose problem, and it was, if you look for it, it's specifically in a review or a blog post that he wrote about Homo Deus, which was the second book from Yuval Harari, the first one being Sapiens, which is one of the books that has impacted me the most. And Homo Deus is essentially a transformative tech book. It says that the next human agenda is happiness, longevity, and augmentation. So the happiness part is clearly transformative tech. The augmentation part, there's a bit of that in, and the longevity point is sort of like, what's the point of living forever if you're miserable? So, you know, those two are tied together. So he was reviewing that book and said that, you know, in this abundant society, in our post-scarcity society that we talk about a lot at places like this, when the nature of work fundamentally changes, when what companies are doing and the nature of work changes, the question that's really going to be important is, what do we do at that point? You're like, what do we do? So there was a woman who wrote this incredible tweet that's been haunting me. Her name is Masha Drakova, and she said, some of the best companies teach us how to be robots, and some of the worst companies teach us how to be slaves. But where are the companies that are teaching us how to be free? So in a post-scarcity society, in an abundant society, when work has changed, and we have nothing but change, the only thing that people will be able to anchor to, and Umar Haque talks a lot about this, he's an economist from London, the only thing we really will be able to anchor to is, what is our purpose? And not a highfalutin purpose, like, oh, but so like for, you know, the bulk of the people on the planet, like, why am I here? Who am I? What is the purpose of my life? And that will be the question that people will have to answer, you know, in the future. And so he was talking about that and like, how do you get at that? So if you just Google Homo Deus and Bill Gates, that note will come up.
And piggybacking off that, actually, the purpose of our company is to, number one, help students next generation to find their identity, their purpose in community, as in their tribe. There was a direct correlation of many of the students we went in and interviewed where they said the ones who were happiest were the ones who had taken the time to really truly reflect themselves from their parents. They asked the right questions. They kept on pushing themselves to be self-reflective, where many of them actually understood what their virtues were, what their values were, and truly understood their identity, and therefore they started to look for purpose in college campuses. So they were too busy finding purpose, meaning their happiness, that they didn't have time to be depressed or anxious. They were out there trying to figure out what their purpose was, which was to become a peer counselor, to become a orientation leader, student body leaders, and they wanted to go out and help other students through these challenges. And so there's a huge value to actually equipping and guiding these students to understand, not just students, like the next generation, even millennials like ourselves, where many of us are still finding ourselves and trying to answer what's our purpose. And giving that time and reflection through guidance is really helpful, and we believe as a company that technology can bring the content and guidance to amplify and bring that kind of exponential technology to help people answer that question themselves.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love your company, is because you're doing that with a group of people who sort of are the rising generation. Also, they're in places that have a lot of people, because it's I have a sense of urgency about this. I think that we have to elevate the social emotional well-being of the human race in time to catch that big transition to automation, so that people not only are equipped to be able to be compensated for what the future of work looks like, but two, they're able to manage the change that's just happening in the world. Okay.
Another fact on
I think
on
you
purpose
can get yours in.
is there's a fair amount of research that people with a sense of purpose are much more resilient physiologically, that they're able to come back after stress if you have a sense of purpose. So it's good stuff.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm so honored to have had you on this panel, and I love what all of you are doing. I believe fundamentally in your companies. And thank you, audience, for your attention. I really appreciate it.